What is up, my fellow chess players? How are all of you doing today? Today, I've yet again another amazing episode of how to make a chess strategy where I will teach you the first of 5 amazing positional ideas that I use to help me climb from 800 to 2000 rated in 2 to 3 years. If you want to be a chess master in the next few years, please smash that like button below and subscribe for more chess related content. Now, onto the position before you. When you look at this position over here, what do you see? What do you think? What is the plan for white? Now, I want you to take out your notebook like last episode, or pieces of paper, and pause the video right now and write down what you think should be white's plan. Mind you, I said plan and not moves, as any player, any decent player of decent caliber can guess the right move from time to time, but a chess master can predict the next 5 to 8 moves, including your opponent's responses. Now that's what I want to teach you in the next few episodes of this series. Now I want you to pause right now. Alright, welcome back. Now I will guide through my thought process when I look at this position. First, like last episode, I need to make candidate moves. These, remember, from our first episode in the series, are moves that make sense in the context of our plan. But what in the world is our plan to begin with? So, from our last episode, we learned about this very important idea, which is the focus in this video, and that is space. What is space in chess? Is space the spaces between our pieces, like here? Do you see this? Is this space, like this pawn over here, this square? Is this square? These squares that our opponents don't control? No, that's not exactly what space is. I remember I had a student back in the day, and what they said is just any places that your pawns do not control. They thought it had something to do with outer space, but that's not entirely correct either. What space is in chess are the squares your pawns control. For example, these squares over here, and usually the areas behind them. So for example, here, here, here. And those squares are all squares that white control in this position. This is considered space. Now, why is it that the pawns are the ones that control space? The idea is very simple. Look at this position here. This bishop cannot come through e6 nor f5 because the pawns control so much space here. Now, the pawn can always chase away pieces away, so they cannot control the squares that they want to control. So in this position, where do we have more space? It's an easy tactic, or it's not a tactic, but it's an easy strategy to see where you have more space is to see where your pawn chain is heading and where your center pawn and where your most forward center pawn is facing. For example, we have this pawn chain over here that is heading that way. Our furthest pawn is on the left over here on the queen side. And we have potential pawns that can run up this way over here very, very, very easily. Therefore, we want to attack on the queen side, and that's where our plan is going to be today. We're going to be attacking the queen side. Now, why do we want to attack areas where we have more space? For beginners, this is especially important to know, because where we have more space is generally where we will be able to move our pieces easily. This queen can come here easily. This rook can come here easily. Our other pieces could come here easily. All our pieces are heading this direction. The best thing about this is because we have space here, and because our pawns control so many squares, guess what? Your opponent's pieces won't be able to defend, because they don't have the squares. So as a beginner, the first thing I want you guys to always think about is space. Now, when we think about this position now, what other things should we focus on? Remember, a very important thing to think about your plan are your opponent's potential threats. Now in this position, I won't ask you to figure it out, but a very common idea in these positions is your opponent might play a move like knight g4 and try to chop off your good bishop that's controlling your entire opponent's queen side. Now, my question for you is, now this one I want you to pause the video for. Would you play the move knight d2 to stop knight g4? where the bishop is controlling, or do you play h3 to protect both the bishop and knight from coming to g4? Pause the video right now. I'll see you again in 2 seconds. 2, 1. The best move here to defend against your opponent's threat, while also, remember this candidate move, attacking the queen side, has to be knight d2. What does knight d2 do? First of all, it doesn't move on a pawn on the side where you have less space. h3 is generally not a good move. Now you might be asking why. You've probably seen a lot of masters, a lot of players play moves like h3 all the time. You create what people call a fire escape, your king won't get back ranked, and your king is just safer. I mean, this pawn controls, your opponent's pieces. But you have to think about your opponent's side too. Your opponent's idea, because you're attacking here, on the queen side over here, guess where he's attacking? 99% of the time in chess, when you're attacking one side, your opponent's trying to find an inequality or trying to fight on the other side of the board. So he'll be trying to play moves like this. And when he plays moves like this, and you have a pawn on h3, his pawn can come contest our pawn, and we have to waste a move doing something with our pawn, which opens up more files. Let me give you an example. Let's just say we play h3, plays knight e8, and let's just say we dilly-dally for a while. We do absolutely nothing. And his pieces just slowly get towards our king. All of a sudden, this position, I know it looks kind of silly because we just kept moving this, which people won't do. All of a sudden, this pawn comes here. Now imagine the pawn was over here. Our pawn wouldn't have to do anything. Our knight can just run back and say, you're not doing anything to me. But now that the pawn is here, we're forced to do something because otherwise they can capture. And we'll be down a pawn. And when we capture, guess what? We just opened a file for our opponent, and bad things will happen. So luckily you guys know that. Now, this is what we call a hook. h3 is what we call a hook. Now, knight d2 is a good move because not only are we defending this while not making a hook or weakness, which, hint, will be the topic of our next video, we're also bringing a piece to the side where we have more space. This knight could potentially go to b3, or another square, which you will see later on. Let's say our opponent's not a bad player, and instead of doing nothing, they play knight e8. Now, what is the point of knight e8? It's to play the move f5, f4, which makes sense in the context of this opening. Let's just say we play b4, trying to get an advantage here, and our opponent plays, I don't know, what should they play? Let's get them to play bishop d7, which is not a good move, by the way, for reasons that are a little bit too complicated right now, but in this video, we'll focus on space. So, in this position, I want you to pause the video again. What is the best move here? What do you think is a good idea based on everything we talked about? Having space. Having space is good and all, but if you can't do anything with your space, eventually it can become a weakness. So, tick tock, 3, 2, 1. Alright. The best plan when you have more space is to go for pawn break, which means you want to get to the base of the chain of your opponent's position. For example, in this position, d6 is a good chain that we can attack. c7 is also a potential target, but it's hard for us to get there. So we're going to play c5. It's the only candidate move. Other moves are possible, like rook c1, knight b3, queen c2, queen 8 b3. All these moves are possible, maybe f3, but again, we don't want to usually move pawns on the side where we have less space. c5 just makes sense because we're already saying, hey, you better do something here. If you take here and we take back, we have a good pawn advantage here. Like, look at this. This is strong. We can play a knight to c4. Let's just say our opponent's playing a useless move like that. Knight c4, and we have these pushes that are very, very dangerous, especially once we get a4, knight b5 in. Our position is crushing. Now, let's say our opponent doesn't capture, because capturing can be quite silly, and they play f5. Now, in these positions, playing f3 is fine because it solidifies our center. If they capture us, this is completely bad for our opponent because all of a sudden there's no more pawn storm here because our pawns will never get attacked. We have a strong rook here contesting his strong rook, and life is good. So instead, our opponent would probably play f4. Now, this is pretty instructive too because if you look at it from our opponent's perspective, he's going for the same plan we are except against our king. So his attack will be a lot more dangerous, but like all kingside attacks, because your king is here, and you don't want your king to be in danger, the attack is going to be much slower than our attack. As you can see, it's already underway. We already have the pawn tension here. Now, what moves should you play here? After bishop f2, your opponent might play a move like knight f6 to attack over here, bring out more pieces. And here, you could play knight c4, saying to your opponent, hey, I'm putting more pressure on your pawn. You better do something about it, otherwise I'm going to capture it for free. And if you can capture all the pawns over here, it doesn't matter how strong your opponent's kingside attack. You're able to come in from here with your forces, and you're able to swoop here against his king. Because even though this is very strong for your opponent, guess what? This is the soft underbelly of the beast over here. So you want to attack there, and you want to win with that, with these ideas. So, knight c4, and I want you to think for black now. What's a good move for him? Should come simple for now. It's just g5. Just push your pawns. Your opponent's attacking here, go attack there. Don't be scared of your king. Your king's not under attack yet. You just have to be scared if your opponent breaks through here. And you won't be able to, I promise you. A lot of weaker chess players often fall for this trap in which... give me a second, let me find... in which they try to defend. For example, in this position, this is very constructive. Why not play b6? Well, I'll tell you why we won't play b6 in this position to stop c5. First of all, it doesn't stop c5. And even if it did for one move, guess what? You're moving a pawn where you have less space. Is this carrying out your plan? No. It may be defending for a move, but if you keep defending, unlike in soccer or other sports, you eventually lose unless your opponent makes, of course, a silly mistake. But we can't assume our opponent makes silly mistakes. So I'll just show you what a couple moves might happen if our opponent is playing a lot of silly moves like bishop d7. We play c5, our opponent plays f5, we play f3, f4, bishop f2, knight g5, knight c4, and let's say now our opponent, let's just say he's only like 1600 rated on FIDE or something, and he doesn't quite know what to do at this point. Now you guys already know what to do because this is simple for you guys at this point. h5, g4, crush your opponent's king. But let's say our opponent doesn't know that because they only know tactics, right? They might just play for, I don't know, knight f6, which is not bad, lose the pawn. Let's just say they play king h8. How do we proceed? a4. When confused in the pawn storm, rush your pawns. It's never wrong to do it, essentially. Let's say our opponent tries to play queen b8, trying to defend his d6 pawn. We basically tell him, or our opponent, you know, all of this is good and all, but I don't think it quite matters. We can play moves like a5. Just slowly progressing our position. Let's say our opponent tries to go full defense. Rook f6. How do we break through? Now, breaking through often can be very difficult, especially if you make a mistake. One thing you never want happening is you never want it to become closed on the side where you have more space. Let me show you why. Let's say you play a6. He plays b6 and then you play c6. All of a sudden, even though this position might be lost for black due to the horrible placement of these pieces and how they're stuck, guess what? Your attack here isn't going anywhere anymore. How are you going to make progression? Only the knights can jump over pieces. That's not good for you. So instead you want to make your opponent open up his position over here. So you're the one who can use the open files. You're the one who can attack his all his pieces. So what's a good move here? Well, maybe rook b1. If he ever takes us, which a lot of beginner players might, we get an open file. They get all these strong entry points. And we'll be able to crush our opponent. Because our opponent is doing the only thing he knows how to defend. Now, there are a lot of other techniques you guys could do here too. You can play knight e3, knight b5. You can play knight e3, this knight to b5, attack c7. Play rook c1, queen c2. You have a lot of time here because your opponent's not doing anything. Our bishops will become very strong soon. And at the right moment, we're the one who gets to choose when to capture. We're the one who gets to choose when to unleash our pieces against our opponent. Because our opponent doesn't know what to do other than just defend. Now, this is a very simplified version of how to attack with space. Because as you guys get better, timing, initiative, tempos become the most important things that you guys will have to focus on. Because these are the things that will decide whether or not you win or lose the race of attacking on the side where you have more space. Now, attacking on the side where you have more space can be very aggressive, but it can also be very fun, as you get to flex those tactics that you guys have been training for a long, long time, while also defending against your opponents. Because make sure, just because you have a plan doesn't mean your opponent doesn't. When you have a plan, it makes it even more important that you know what your opponent's trying to do, so you can execute your plan, show off to your friends that how cool you are, how cool your positions are, how dominating your positions win. Now, if you guys win a game with a space attack, I want you guys to show me the PGN, or just send it, or tell the people in the chat, in the comment section below. And I hope you guys truly enjoyed this video. I hope to see you again in the next one. This is Sean Lei, signing off.